Thank you. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for organizing this hearing. Thanks to each of you for being here. The United States of America is one of the most generous countries in the entire world. It also happens to be one of the most upwardly mobile countries in the entire world. It's somewhat unique in the sense that a person can be born into poverty here or arrive here as poverty, as a refugee or otherwise, and have the reasonable hope and expectation, if they work hard, one day they are likely to be able to retire comfortably, if not wealthy. This requires access not so much to government programs as to robust institutions of civil society and free markets, more than anything else, much as many would like to have us believe otherwise. Key to those institutions of civil society are these charitable activities to which I referred. Americans donate nearly $600 billion a year in charity every single year. This in addition to an estimated $1.8 trillion annually that federal and state governments spend on anti-poverty welfare programs, not including things like Medicare and Social Security that are about retirement rather than anti-poverty measures. Now, if you ask almost anyone, which of those programs, whether a government program, whether state or federal, or very often it's a state program administered by states with a lot of federal funding, sometimes it's one or the other, very often there's a mixture. If you ask them, what has a greater chance of achieving what I think should always be the ideal of any welfare system, the objective, which is to make poverty temporary rather than tolerable. I think 9 out of 10, perhaps 99 out of 100 individuals would say that it is privately funded welfare programs. Why? Well, because they're set up in such a way that they can be much more about the individual. They can be much more about identifying ways in which you can make poverty temporary rather than tolerable. In fact, one could argue that for these government programs, it's even too complimentary of many of the government programs to say that the objective is to make poverty tolerable rather than temporary. Very often the objective is to facilitate the very kind of waste, fraud, and abuse that we see here, that we're examining here today, in a relatively discrete part of the country involving the Somali community in one state, Minnesota. So lest we delude ourselves into thinking that this is an aberration, lest we delude ourselves, alternatively, into thinking that, all we need are better, smarter managers, more efficient people who will suddenly identify and become enlightened as to best practices to make sure this doesn't happen. This is what this thing does. You don't put a hornet's nest in your child's bedroom and expect that it won't cause problems at some point. You don't release blank checks and allow those blank checks to be cashed at will by people who are not directly paying the bill because somebody else is. 350 million Americans are sharing in that burden, and expect there not to be fraud. Not just occasional fraud, but massive, earth-shaking kinds of fraud that cause people to lose faith in the system. Meanwhile, what is it getting us? Under these systems, particularly the federally funded state-administered programs, under what circumstances do we have evidence that this is making poverty temporary rather than tolerable? And in what circumstances do we have evidence that it's not facilitating fraud? So let's not kid ourselves. This is, if anything, the tip of the iceberg. It happened to manifest itself very well because of Nick Shirley and a few other brave journalists who stepped into the fray on this one and have taken a lot of heat as a result. But I suspect that this is the tip of the iceberg. Mr. Hope, in your view, did the Minnesota state government, either through incompetence or willful ignorance, reckless blindness or otherwise, did it enable the Somali fraud in Minnesota?
Yes.
How did it do that?
Complicity.
Complicity with what degree of awareness as to the level of fraud that was being undertaken?
100%.
100%. So this was not a bug, was it? This was a feature. So when we look at the fact that the federal government is $38.5 trillion in debt, when we look at the fact that we've impoverished Americans, keep in mind, when we spend this much money that we don't have, adding to that $38.5 trillion debt at a staggering rate approaching $2 trillion a year, what does that do? I'll give you a hint. It is not the rich people who suffer. Rich people find ways of getting even richer during times of tremendous inflation. It is hardworking Americans, especially poor Americans, and middle-class Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck. They are the ones who suffer. And damn all of us if we don't look out for them. Shame on all of us if we don't fix this. And by fix it, I don't mean get smarter people, have better procedures. I mean, maybe we should start looking at the fact that our Constitution puts this government in charge of a few things: national defense, weights and measures, trademark, copyrights, and patents, regulating trade or commerce between the states with foreign nations and with the tribes. There are a few others, but that's the lion's share of the power. We were not equipped from the beginning to be a welfare agency. The word welfare appears exactly twice in the Constitution, once in a non-operative, non-authority granting preamble, and a second time in the spending clause, which was included as a limitation on the spending power rather than an expansion of it. There is no power to just look out for people generally, unless we rely on a bastardized version of the Constitution that has driven us into $38.5 trillion in debt, crippling poor and middle-class Americans with destabilizing inflation that it makes it impossible to raise a family in this country. And shame on all of us if we don't take this as a severe wake-up call, because this is going on all the time. Thank you.